as we know, John McMullen, we're getting closer. I want to get your opinion on this because I think Ryan asked me the question yesterday. I got an email from someone today. Do you think that regardless of DeSean Jackson's health, that they should just sit him this week and just wait for him to get 100% or as close and come back after that bye?
It's an interesting question. It got brought up to Doug yesterday. He said it's part of the thought process, part of the strategy. But if the medical staff clears him and he feels ready to go, they're going to play him. And I think that's the right way to go. I mean, he's been out for an extensive period of time. So this is not an issue where you're saying maybe he's been out a short period, maybe he's got a hamstring, he's been out for a game or two, and that extra week would really help. He's been out for a long time already. And everyone has acknowledged, basically, that there's going to be some discomfort. So this is what he signed up for. And that extra week is not going to make that much of a difference. So if he's healthy, he should play. And that's how the Eagles are looking at it.
Yeah, if you take a look at that and also this Bears defense, I mean, to me, to look at the Bears is kind of like, hey, this is a kind of you can win the game without DeSean Jackson. I don't know that I agree with that. Like, I think the Bears, yes, their offense is suspect, but you beat them last year 17-16. I could easily see something like that reversed, if you don't come to play.
Yeah, this isn't the Jets with Luke Falk, where you could probably say that. I mean, this is still a good football team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, and they're really good on that side. But they can beat anybody on any given Sunday. So the cliche applies in this particular game. There's no way you can take a game like this for granted. I mean, there's too many good players on that other sideline, and it's a good spot for the Eagles because they've been away for so long. They're coming home. The fans are going to be charged up. You have a bad quarterback, so they're not going to be able to take advantage of one of your weaknesses and all of that. But that's what it is. It's a nice little spot, but you got to show up and play because if you don't, they have difference makers on defense, and they can wreck games, starting with Khalil Mack. He can wreck a football game.
I want to get into that with you because we were talking about Andre Dillard earlier in the show. We had some questions from listeners on Dillard and his progress. Do the Bears move Mack around? Like, they say, hey, we got a rookie left tackle here. I like this matchup.
Yeah, they will. He does move around generally. Typically, he lines up on the left side of the defensive formation, which would be over Lane Johnson. But he does move around, and they do take advantage of potential matchups. And the Eagles are expecting to see a lot of them on the right side going against Andre Dillard. They expect that. They're going in, they're game planning with that in mind. And I don't think there's any question. A lot of times Chicago leaves it up to Khalil himself, and if he feels he's got a matchup advantage on a particular play, and he's going to look at a rookie, and he's going to see the tape, and he's going to see the bull rushes that Andre has had trouble with against particularly Everson Griffin and DeMarcus Lawrence, and he's one of the best bull rushers in football. Yeah, I mean, they're going to try to take advantage of that.
John, you bring up Andre Dillard, and that's a good segue here because Jeff was talking earlier about he's a great player. We've seen flashes of what he can do and why he was picked where he's at, but he is a rookie, and with offensive linemen, it takes time to get the strength and the brute force that is required at that position especially. It just doesn't happen overnight, your first few games in the NFL. So talk about his role since he's been plugged in there, and is he a liability at this point, or is he able to handle his own here come this Sunday against Chicago?
No, I think the Eagles are really happy with the way he's performed, being thrown in there against the Vikings. and having to play since then. And as I mentioned, even Buffalo, he's been against some really good pass rushers. And that's just what the NFL is at this point because there's so many good defensive linemen. He'll be that way again. He's a natural pass protector. He's tremendously athletic. He's already got that part of it down as far as handling speed rushers and things like that. He's already way ahead of the game. But, yeah, he needs that strength. And that's no surprise. Everybody goes through it. Lane Johnson talked about it. He went through it. It's just part of the process. And until you get there, you sort of have to you got to really sharpen up your technique and really handle it that way. And it's still a work in progress from that standpoint. So, like I said, the one weakness is the bull rush. And other teams see that, and you've seen it in a number of instances. But overall, they're really happy with the way he's performed.
Well, that's a good sign, and let's hope that he continues to, progress in the right direction here as he's inevitably going to take over that spot in the near future, if even not for injury. But talk about the run game a little bit more, John, with that offensive line and with this matchup. And I think the two running backs on the field is interesting, and I'm going to obsess over that like every other fan. And I know that's a little bit overblown, but it's not something we typically see with the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's the obsessive topic of the week, and I'm sticking with it. Are they going to go back to that this Sunday?
Well, they might, but I mean, if you're talking about 60 offensive plays in a game, you might see that twice. I mean, yeah, that's being obsessive. It just happened to work.
Well, we're used to not seeing it at all.
Yeah, and it was a new look, and that's part of the reason why it worked. Because they did catch Buffalo by surprise, and then they executed well. It has more. I mean, you can have. We talk about formations all the time. We talk about play calls. I got news for you. If you blocked the way Isaac Seumalo blocked on that play, and Jordan Howard blocked on that play, it doesn't matter who's on the field. It's going to work. So to me, it has more to do with the execution than whether you're looking at whether it's 11, 12, 13, 21, 22, whatever personnel grouping you want to throw out there. If guys do their job and execute the way they did on that particular play, it's going to be a success. And that, to me, is the bigger point. I mean, you just tip your cap to the players and say, wow, they did a phenomenal job executing on that play. And even the coaches said that. I mean, you could design the greatest play in the world, but if one guy misses his block, it's not going to work. So, Colin Thompson says it all the time. It's not about X's and O's. It's about Jimmys and Joes. It's about the players. That's not to say you can go in there with a terrible, terrible game plan, but that play specifically, because people are obsessing over it, just focus on those two blocks. I mean, that's what that play was about, not the personnel group.
Yeah, John, and, obviously, you talk about Jimmy's and Joe's, the personnel defensively here. Are the Eagles, and do you feel that they finally feel comfortable with their defensive personnel? Halfway through the season, they really haven't had, and they still don't and won't, obviously, because Malik Jackson's out. We don't know Jernigan's status for Sunday, but are they starting to feel like this defense, if I say closer to where it was last year, because last year they had some problems because of the injuries, but is this finally Jim Schwartz's first opportunity to kind of let his hair down a little bit maybe?
I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if you get there until Tim Jernigan's back, until Nigel Bradham's back. And then, then he's at sort of full speed ahead of what he has at his disposal. You still have the young defensive tackles who barely played. They didn't play at all. Anthony Russ and Albert Huggins. Bruce Hector played a little bit last year. Now he's down to Rush and Huggins because they had to put Hector back on the practice squad to make room for Avery. and then Nigel's still not at practice today, so I think he's going to miss his third straight game. When he gets those guys back, I think then you're at the best he can possibly be at this particular situation, and then he'll start to feel a little bit better. But when you talk about the secondary, yeah, I mean, he feels much better about the cornerback situation. He's just much more confident.
And how much do you think that changes the way he calls a game, just having those two guys back there? Less blitzing, because I know those two guys are there. We've seen, I think, more blitzing from Schwartz, and, the fans love to see more blitzes. But how does having Maddox potentially back, Mills, and Darby, how does having all three of those guys together change the way Schwartz will call a game?
Well, I think it has more to do with the opposition. And he talks about, because I asked him, he played some 4 linebacker looks in Buffalo, and I asked him if that had to do with, Josh Allen being more of a runner or the weather in the fact that it affected things. Because let's face it, they're not deep at linebacker, so why are you throwing 4 on the field? That was my question, essentially. And he said, no, it had to do with the personnel grouping in Buffalo as a running team. They're going with a lot of jumbo packages, so he was just trying to match up. And he always says that. I mean, as a defensive coordinator, you have to react to what the offense is doing. And they only blitzed twice in Buffalo, and that's because the quarterback is not really capable of throwing the football consistently. So I don't think they're going to blitz a ton against Chicago, but that could change against better quarterbacks down the line. But yeah, I mean, they can do a lot more because he has more confidence that Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby are going to do their jobs. And there's a lot of mental errors on the back end when those guys weren't out there. And I think from his standpoint, that's the most disappointing thing. If you get beaten physically, that's one thing. But if you're getting mental errors, broken coverages, I think that was the bigger disappointment for him.
Yeah, so as it relates to, obviously, the matchup Sunday against Chicago, how do you anticipate, Schwartz to handle all of that? You mentioned the blitz, and that number is pretty low. So is he going to drop extra guys back in coverage? How's the Bears' offensive line, if you want to touch on that? Is there any opportunities for, the Eagles' front 7, front 4 to really, do some damage? Now, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, they've struggled. An offensive line, which was a strength last season, is not a strength this season. And that's been a big disappointment. The quarterback we've talked a lot about has been a big disappointment. They gave up on Jordan Howard. They can't run the ball, so they made a mistake there. You really can't lean on anything they do well other than Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's a really good receiver. He's the type of big physical receiver that can dominate, sort of a Alshon Jeffrey type, but Alshon when he was more explosive. So he can do a lot of those things, really good with back shoulder stuff, really good with contested catches. And as I said, he has some juice. So that would typically be a receiver, if you think early in the season about how many good receivers gashed the Eagles, he could be in that category. But, again, you don't have the consistency at the quarterback position to get him the football consistently. So that leans you into a little more positivity in the fact that you can hold up, plus the fact that, as I said, Mills and Darby, at least the Darby that's come back last week, look a lot better than the other corners that were out there. So from that point, there's some optimism.
Yeah, and, the linebacker group, John, is also an area that's been under scrutiny, I guess you can describe it as such. And Nate Gary has been someone that I think to the average fan, they're not happy with him, but you pointed
Well,
out
they don't like
frequently that he's actually been playing well. Yeah, I don't know why. Is it just like his face or what's going on? Like I
don't know. I don't
the
know.
Step Brothers quote, I just hate your face.
He was seen hanging out with Gabe Kapler.
I think, yeah, he does yoga with Kapler, so maybe that's it. But, just touch on the linebacker group for this matchup as well and how you think they've been coming along all season.
Well, I think it's an issue. I mean, I don't think they have a ton of talent at that position. It gets worse without Nigel out there. But even with Nigel, I think it's a weakness on this team. But I do think Nate forced into action after they moved on after Zach Brown. I think he's been a pleasant surprise. I think he's played better than expected. But, yeah, it's a weird – I call him the Jalen Mills now. Jalen is kind of back because he's been gone so long, and people didn't like him for whatever reason. And then he was gone so long, they kind of figured out, well, he wasn't really that bad when you consider the alternative. So I don't know, because Nate, other than the fact that he was a safety in college, and there have been some ugly instances in run support. He's certainly not the biggest linebacker in the world. But that's the modern NFL. It's about coverage more than run support. And now that he's been forced onto the field, he's actually, if anything, been a pleasant surprise. And I don't know, maybe people will catch on, but I do think it's been a positive, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's a strength of this football team. As a whole, they don't value the linebacker position, and it's showing up.
Are they wrong about that? Are they wrong about that?
I don't know. I mean, every team allocates assets in particular ways, and to me, it comes down to, like, do you have the opportunity to get a difference-maker linebacker, a true three-down guy who can do a lot of different things? I think you jump at it. But I think as a whole, you do what the Eagles do. You got to build up front on both sides of the ball. That's always been their DNA since Andy Reid got here, and that's the right way to do it. The question is, if a linebacker like Luke Kuechly or somebody like that, Eric Kendricks is having a great year, would they have taken those types of players if they had the opportunity? I don't know. They should. But there's not a lot of those guys. There's not a lot of true three-down linebackers. And so you just kind of cobble it together. But I will say they should be better than they are at the position. And they should pay a little bit more attention. And, hey, part of it could have been just keeping L.J. Fort. I still can't figure out that one. People are worried about compensatory picks next year. If you consider yourself a Super Bowl contender, and the Eagles did, you're not worried about fourth-round picks the next April, or you shouldn't be.
And real quick on that, because there was somebody, I can't remember who it was on the show, maybe a year ago, during the play, and he said, look, these teams aren't playing linebackers anymore, smaller guys. We're going to run the ball at you. You don't have linebackers, we'll run the ball at you. I mean, is that a trend that you think can kind of like the Sixers are playing bully ball in the NBA? Everybody wants to shoot a three, we're going to pound you down low. Everybody wants to throw the ball, you don't have linebackers, we're going to run the ball at you. A lot of people look at it like, is that something that we're seeing in the NFL, or is that not catching on? Like, guys are playing small linebackers, let's go after them with the run game.
Well, that's what the Patriots did late last season. So I think if you have that kind of confidence and the weather turns and you start to be in the Midwest or the East Coast and you have these bad weather games, I think that's what the Patriots did down the stretch and in the playoffs, and they dominated and they took advantage of certain teams that weren't playing linebackers, putting 6 defensive backs on the field, and they just ran Sony Michel down their throats. But I talk about Bill Belichick a lot. There aren't many coaches in this league who are willing to change their identity from week to week. In fact, there's one, and it's Bill Belichick. So do I think A lot of teams will do that, maybe on occasion, but not consistently. And you saw it last week. I mean, the Eagles changed their philosophy because of the weather last week in Buffalo, but I don't think they're going to change the DNA of their team, even without DeSean Jackson. And you could argue they should, but they're not going to.
All right, Eagles-Bears this Sunday. Big game, 3-4. Chicago really playing for their season. Philly at 4-4. A win here. And you know, quite frankly, the Eagles got to start piling NFC wins up, too. And this is an NFC battle. The winner of this game keeps themselves in some good standing. The loser, especially if it's the Bears, they're in some big trouble. So it's a key game in the NFC. It's all this Sunday. Listen to the game live on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage starts with the Countdown to Kickoff show at 10 a.m., live from Tollman Joe's. And, of course, we're giving away 5 pair of tickets to the Eagles and Bears game. Listen in the 5 o'clock hour for your chance to enter. He's John McMullen. It's Football at 4. We do it every day. Been doing it for years right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys. And real quick, I thought I was going to get the question, so I'm going to be proactive. Josh Gordon, no.
Oh. No, Josh Gordon. But I will ask you this, because Mays and Aton brought it up in reference to the Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid scuffle. Who was the face and who was the heel last night? And who is the biggest heel in wrestling history?
Biggest heel in wrestling history to me would be Rowdy Piper. I think he's the best. Or Terry Funk, you can make an argument, but you got to be a little bit older. Who was the heel last night? Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, the fans were behind Joel. He's like a stone cold Steve Austin babyface.
Simmons could have been the low-key heel there.
Did you see the John Clark tweet about Karl Anthony Towns saying that he cried when the Eagles won the Super Bowl? It was the best moment of his life.
Yeah, he's a big Eagles fan. Huge Eagles fan.
Yeah.
I
called one of his games in high school.
That's right.
Yeah, if they knew that, they might like him a little bit better. But, you know, if he were like Mike Trout, maybe if Joel Embiid didn't exist, he'd be like Mike Trout, and everybody would be saying he was going to come here because he loved the Eagles. But they don't care because they have Joel Embiid.
Oh, his production is slightly less than Mike Trout's, I would say, but nonetheless.
Yeah, but he's an Eagles fan. That's the correlation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's all that matters.
All right, we'll do it again tomorrow. We'll have John's pick and everything more on the Eagles and Bears here on the Sports Bash Football at 4. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, guys.